Programme, but I'm joined now by two members of the Storm and Finance Committee, Sinn Féin's Daithí McKay and the DUP Simon Hamilton. You're both very welcome. Just to give listeners an idea of the kind of detail that we've been hearing now in the last few days, we've started to hear potentially about 150 extra job losses in the Environment Department, 4,000 potential job losses according to the Health Minister Michael McGimpsey, and then schools which have tried to build up surpluses to pay for special projects, suddenly finding that they might lose them as a result of the loss of what's known as end-year flexibility. All of this has come sometime after the original draft budget was agreed, and we've seen now a week being added to the consultation period, which was due to end on February the 9th, has been extended to February the 16th. Daithí McKay, to begin with, Sinn Féin controlled departments were amongst some of the last to submit their budgets. Hasn't that made a bit of a mockery of the consultation process?
Well, I think it's important, Mark, that we get the budget documents right. And certainly if you look at Conor Murphy's budget consultation document, it had between 50 to 60 pages and was lauded by economists on Friday as being on the mark. Compare that to the Health Minister, Michael McGimpsey, who has released a document which is only 9 pages long for the biggest department in the north and is full of suggestions and possibilities, but very little figures. Now, a lot of people should be concerned about that and the fact that the Health Minister is playing party politics with this particular budget, because at the executive last week, whilst other ministers were meeting and discussing these very important matters, Michael McGimpsey didn't attend. He was out briefing the media and playing media games as opposed to concentrating on his department and concentrating on delivering efficiencies and tackling the inefficiencies within his own department.
Well, I mean, Simon Hamilton, I imagine that you, for obvious party political reasons, would equally be fairly scathing about Michael McGimpsey, but rather than simply giving you a platform to do that, given that he's not here, is it enough to simply extend the consultation by a 1-week period when we've had so much of what was meant to be the time when the public could express their views eaten up by departments not actually coming up with the detail?
Well, certainly it hasn't been helpful that departments are have only this week just completed all of the expenditure and savings plans. Sammy Wilson was warning all departments, as far back as May and June of last year, and asking them to be ready for cuts in the region of 5% annually. Now, many departments have actually done much better than that as a result of the draft budget, and one wonders why then it took some of them so long to take that work that they should have been doing already, dust that down and adjust that so that people could get the optimum amount of time out of the consultation period. But on Michael McGimpsey's position, I have to say, here is a minister of the executive who, back in May of last year, was running around this country canvassing people in Northern Ireland, asking for votes for the very Tory party who now form the government in Westminster, who have taken nearly 10% out of our current expenditure, 40% out of our capital budget, have now then, with the stroke of a pen, taken away our end-year flexibility and the savings that allowed departments and public bodies here to enjoy, and he is now complaining. I mean, we would all love to give the health department much more. It's everybody's number one priority, but the cake is only so big, and that cake has now shrunk courtesy of the Tory party and its franchise operation in Northern Ireland, the Ulster Unionists.
Well, I mean, you say you'd love to give health more, but what happened to all that talk of ring-fencing health if he's got to look potentially at making 4,000 people unemployed? That's not much of protection, is it?
It has been shown subsequently that the 4,000 job loss figure has all the credibility if something gets in the back of an envelope. Health has been afforded some protection. The health budget, similarly to that in England, has been ring-fenced. In fact, it's better than England in that they don't have to endure the same sort of efficiency savings regime that they have in England. The finance minister, whoever that is in the future, has full flexibility with their budget, meaning they can move money around within that. That's a luxury not afforded to any other government minister in Northern Ireland, and one that I'm sure a lot of them would covet. And his reduction has also been less than in Scotland, where it was about 0.5% of a cut. And in fact, he's, I think, marginally better off over the period in current expenditure, and certainly much better in Wales, where they faced the 2.5% cut. So, Michael McGimpsey's a man who's not known for being happy. Even though he lauded the last budget as one that was a good deal for health, he continued to complain throughout out, and I'm not surprised that he's doing it now. But I think people see through the scaremongering that he's engaged.
Well, I mean, it's easy for a DUP politician and Sinn Féin politician to sit here and have a go at an Ulster Unionist politician, but he wasn't the only minister who delivered a shock to those within his sector. I mean, Katrina Ruan this week starts telling schools who've been trying to build up surpluses, by the way, you're going to lose them to the Treasury. Sammy Wilson says, oh, we've known about this since June. Shouldn't one of your parties have actually told the schools so they could start spending the money, Daithí McKay?
Well, I think it's important to remember, Mark, that this budget is a draft budget and it hasn't been finally completed and signed off on. Now, what Katrina has outlined is that the executive as a whole is losing 300 million as a result of the EYF being cut by the Tory government, and included in that is 87.2 million, which was to go towards schools for future projects, etc. But Katrina has lobbied Sammy Wilson and will continue to lobby him to ensure that shortfall is met. But we have to bear in mind...
But has this happened or not? Because Sammy Wilson said he knew about this in June. I mean, is that money just gone, or what's your understanding?
Certainly, I recall it being, as a result of the emergency budget that the Tory government announced back in about June. It was certainly something that everybody was aware of. I think it's
NG flexibility, just to explain, because it's quite technical for the listeners, people have understood this around Stormont as the money that departments maybe give up at a certain period and then the finance minister hands that out to other departments. I don't think anybody really cottoned onto the notion that individual schools would suddenly have their kitties raided.
Yeah, and what I think is now important, though, is that the education minister, as quickly as she possibly can, makes it clear to schools what they can do in the limited time that may be available to them. I think it is important that, because we shouldn't be, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be punishing schools, to take that example, who have been prudent, who are encouraged to be prudent. We shouldn't be punishing them, and more importantly, shouldn't be punishing the pupils who are educated within those schools.
Obviously, part of this is that the devil in the budget consultation is in the detail. I mean, Daithí McKay, last month you would have been the darling of Greek campaigners because your proposal for a plastic bag tax here was accepted in Sammy Wilson's budget. It's going to go into law. That's great from the environmental point of view. It was only when we had the Environment Department document this week that we suddenly found they are going to lose £4 million, which will go towards what's known as the Green New Deal, which they expect to get from your plastic bag tax, but they're going to lose the money up front. They're going to have to start suspending projects to do with restoring rivers, stopping fly tipping, repatriating waste right now, even before they get any of the money. Isn't that a classic sort of cart before the horse?
Well, the point I was going to make earlier, Mark, in regard to the Department of Education and the EYF, this isn't a completed process, because the budget identified £1.6 billion worth of additional revenue, and included within these allocations.
Did it, or was it just Sinn Féin ministers who said that was that?
800 million. So there's still £800 million to be allocated. Now that £800 million could go towards things like the EYF. It does include the figures, the £4 million a year in terms of the Green New Deal coming from the plastic bag levy. But further to that, there are more opportunities to generate funds. If within the Department of Education, the Minister is allowed by the Executive to process the ESA, Education Skills Authority, that will generate £20 million a year over the next 4 years, which will cover the EYF.